Alrighty. We're middle of, it looks like it's going to take us a while to complete, but Siman Pei, which is Kitzur, chapter 80, that deals with all the laws of details of the Melachos of Shabbos. We're holding now in on halacha number 27. Yeah. So halacha 27 is like this. It says, Kol davar shahayisrael asur lasoisai, anything that is prohibited for a Jew to do. Hold on a second, I got that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so kol davar I'm not sure why it's not working here. Something's not right with, hold on a second. Rebecca, do you see the text coming up?
Yes, I do see it.
It's very limited over here. Hold on a second. Hey, Aaron.
Hi.
Okay. Not sure why I can't see the screen and the. Let me hold on. Oh, here we go.
Your screen works. You can't see it. We saw it. Now we don't see it.
Yeah, now I'm bringing it back up again. It was moving a bit slow. Hold on. Let's do this again. Let's let Barbara in. Okay. You see the screen now, Aaron?
Yep.
Okay, so we have like this. Let's start again. We're holding law number 27. Kol davar shayisrael asur lasoisai, whatever is prohibited for a Jew to do on Shabbos, and we learned mainly about this. We're not going to go in now into the laws of Amir al-Nakhri, but we're going into specifics of the malacha that we're talking about. Means we've already tackled a bit about what you're allowed to tell a Gentile to do or not. We're not going into that. We're going into the specifics when it comes to heating up a house. We'll see in a second. So Asr Gam Kain Al Yidei Ein Yehudi. It shouldn't be done by a non-Jew for the Jew. Obviously, the non-Jew could do whatever he likes for himself. We're talking about here for a non-Jew doing it for the Jew. However, so that said, yes, Aaron.
Is this the same as cooling our house?
Let's see. So it says Mikol Makim. Nevertheless, good question. Mikol Makim, getting ahead. Mikol Makim b'mei achorif in the winter. Kivan shemutarm lahasik es ataner kedei lechames abayis adei ein Yehudi. Because it's permitted to have a non-Jew heat up the house for on Shabbos, as we will tackle this issue later in the Kamon Siman Sadik in chapter 90. So we're in chapter 80 now. So we're talking about 10 chapters ahead in Sif Yud Ches, law number 18. So we permit. We'll get there, but what we're talking about is that in the case, and we'll see when, where it's permitted to have a Gentile turn on the heating on Shabbos, is noegin she'eni Yehudi ma'amid is a tafshil shenitztanenu. So the custom is that a non-Jew is allowed to put on certain foods that have cooled al hataner on the heater, meaning to say on the heating. Let's say those days they had, let's say the furnace, right? Al hataner koidim shumasike, before he turns it on. So let's say we're talking about wood heat and a furnace in a house, right? So if he comes and he lights the fire and he puts on top of the metal over there, he puts some foods that have cooled. So he puts it before he lights the fire. And only afterwards he turns the fire on. The intention over here is not about the food. The intention is the house is cold. And because the house is cold, it needs to be heated. So, and by the way, if the heating goes on, then naturally the foods that are on the cold heater now will turn hot. The main intention is to heat up the house. Yesh matirim, there are those who permit for the Gentile to put these foods. Obviously, we're talking about for yourself. These are foods for the Jewish people. We're not talking about the Gentile putting on his own private food. We're talking about that he comes into the Jewish home, and the Gentile puts the cooled food on the heater, and then heats the hold on, Aaron, let me first finish the law. And then he heats up the heater. So but they permit that you should do that. We'll finish the law and then we'll go to questions because there's different opinions here. Number one is that the condition is that he must or she must place the food on before they turn on the heat. You can't turn on the heat and then place the food. So what we're doing over here by doing that is that when the food was placed on the heater, there was nothing happening. The heater was cool. Only then he turns on the heater. It happens to be that the food is there, and therefore it warms up. Okay. Upshita, and what's obvious is that if there's no need, so to say, there's no kavana, there's no intention to heat up the house. El b'shvil tafshilin, this is all a ruse just to be able to heat up the food. Vadi aser b'cholinin, then it's totally prohibited, even to place it on before. Means if you're placing the food on and turning on the heater, it's like turning on an oven for all practical purposes. Then he says, however, there's still those who say that it's prohibited. Even if the intention is to heat up the house, there's still those who say it's prohibited. And even though the custom is to be lenient in this situation, meaning to say that we're allowing what's prohibited and permissible. Again, the discussion about heating up the house, which brings up Aaron's question about cooling the house, is not really discussed here. We're talking about the byproduct of this, which is to heat up the house for, if you're allowed to, by the way, also heat up the food, and in what way is that permissible? So number one is the food has to be on when the furnace is still cold, and the intention has to be really for the heat. Now, regarding Aaron's question, your question about the cooling, the reason why there are those who permit to have a Gentile turn on the furnace on Shabbos is because when a person's very cold, some people say it's not talking about where you're just a little bit chilly, but you're really cold. Let's say, New York, East Coast, Canada, or in Russia, right? These places where it gets really cold, and if there's no heat in the house, it's actually dangerous. So then you become classified as like a chola, a person who's sick. That in certain cases where there's someone who's sick, you're allowed to ask a guy to do things, a Gentile to do things like we discussed. So that kind of cold is in a situation where it's basically called we're dealing with the situation of a sakana, where we're concerned of some sort of level of danger. Does that apply in a case where it's sweltering hot and vice versa, without turning on the air conditioning? It could also be a sakana that we have to examine, and we'll examine that when we get to those laws. I'm assuming that because I know there are those who are lenient about turning on the air conditioning, because you could also say that it can bring a person to such an extreme situation where heat is dangerous. Nevertheless, mikol makim bal nefesh, a person who's conscious of their soul, so to say, meaning to say someone who wants to be more careful. If it's not so important to have the food heated up, so even though we're here, we're putting on the heater because the house is cold, and that's clear. No one's arguing. And you put on the food and the Gentile put the food on the heater before it was heated up. So the actual placing the food, there was no food being placed on a fire. The fire came afterwards. Yeah. Nevertheless, if it's not so important, then even be careful. Nevertheless, tanuri barzel, these metal ovens, that they were basically they were ovens that are made to cook, and the ovens also heat the house, which he calls in Yiddish shvarkicha. Even though right now it's being turned on for the heat aspect of it. And the Gentile put the cold food on before he or she lit it. So there's the God-fearing person, Yimanim is that should be careful. So we have a lot of different levels here, right? We have Baal Nefesh, Yari Hashem, different types of ovens and different types of situations. So let's first do the footnotes, and then we'll get to questions about this. I remember clearly, I remember reading somewhere that in Yerushalayim that was something about that there was these general ovens or heatings that went on that people they carried because there was an eruv that people would have the general places where they would keep the food hot on Shabbos. I think some way or another. Somewhere or another was done in some sort of idea of heating the house, I think. Either way, let's see what the footnote says. Footnote number 104 says like this. Okay, see Kitzur Shulchan Aruch chapter 73. about what laws are allowed to be done by the Gentile. Okay, number 105. According to the Shulchan Aruch 276 halacha 5, you may tell the non-Jew to light an oven to heat your home only when it is bitter cold. So the dagosh here, the emphasis here is on the bitter. So just when you're just uncomfortably cold, it's not bitter cold. When the house is when a house is that cold, i.e., bitter cold, the people in the house have the halacha of a sick person. So they have a halacha of a chayla, and they are permitted to tell the non-Jew to do something to alleviate the situation, to make the situation better. Meaning, like we're in situations of a sick person, you're allowed to kind of talk to the Gentile to ask the Gentile, he or she, to help with getting rid of the heat with the cold. Okay. If the cold is not bitter, and the non-Jew lights the oven on Shabbos to heat the house, if he is hired on a contractual basis, hired to take care of the heating of the house for the winter, that's his job in general. That he has to take care of the heating of the house, or she, whereby what he does is considered that he does it for himself and not for you. You may enjoy the benefits on Shabbos. Meaning to say, the Mishnah Berurah says that if you have a contracted Gentile, and his job is, and the reason he has this job is to take care of the heating of the house and monitoring it. So if he's going to turn on the heat and to turn it off the heat, so that's part of his job, and therefore he's doing it totally for himself. What does it mean he's doing it for himself? He's doing it to keep his job, to be paid. So though it works out that on Shabbos you're benefiting from it, the Mishnah Berurah says you're allowed to. So in the case where it's not bitter cold, but it's not just that you're asking someone from the street to turn on your heat, but this is someone who takes care of your house. Let's say in the shul you have the janitor, etc. That's their job. So then they're doing it as part of the job. So everything's about themselves because by performing their job, it's part of their pay. So they're not focused on you; they're focused on doing their job, so they get paid. So then you're allowed to benefit from it. Here we're talking about benefiting from the heat of the house, not talking about benefiting from cooking of the house. Okay, number 107. Okay, Aaron, you wanted to ask something.
Yes. So I understand 1000% everything you said about the Gentile and heat in the house. But if you have food involved with a stove, even if you're heating the house, you're not allowed to. If you turned on the flame, it's not kosher anymore in cooking. So how could it be kosher here?
We're not talking about non-cooked food. We're talking about reheating food. It's reheating is
So
the
let me just ask you this general question. In
yeah.
general, I make a dish and then I have leftovers. My Gentile maid or cook can then turn on the flame and reheat my food?
The aim bishla acher bishla. We said there's no cooking after cooking. So especially if we're talking about solids. So that's not the concern over here to have. That wouldn't be a problem to having heating up the food. Over here, the problem is the Shabbos component, not the Gentiles cooking the food.
Okay.
Hold on, I just want to bring up this chart. Not sure why it's not popping up. My computer never behaves when it's supposed to. Hold on 1 second. I created a chart for this. So we have everything froze. Hold on.
Explain and then redo your computer.
Hold on a
While
second.
you're explaining it, you can redo your computer.
No, I don't want to redo the computer. I want to do this page here. Hold on a second. This whole section froze up.
That's why you have the Gentile opening up the fire.
Yeah, I mean, talking about others doing things. Hold on, I hope this doesn't have to. I'm trying to figure out how to get this whole thing.
So let me just ask you this while you get bringing up the page.
Yeah.
So forget about the oven. We don't have ovens like that anymore. Are we allowed to have a Gentile put up
Some people have ovens like that.
I mean, a non-oven, it's not an oven, and I have steam. So everything would apply to that.
What do you mean the steam?
I have like, what do you call it? A big piece of metal that's attached to the wall.
The New York ones, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's sometimes in Israel. That also, by the way, is not such a big deal. That I mean, if let's say you have the ones in New York, the old ones, the big coils.
Yeah.
So that those you could, let's say you could, I mean, if it's hot enough, you could warm food up on those. And like if you wanted to warm up your chicken or meat, and someone came in and turned on the oven, that would be a similar situation that we're talking about over here.
Okay.
Just let me try one more time. I did prepare this. I don't know what of all the documents.
Because
These are
the heater is run by hot water that goes through the pipes.
okay. Yeah, but you have to turn on
Well, they do it for the building, but I was saying if you have your own house
no,
and
but so,
you have a,
if you're doing it for you, even if they're doing it for the building, but you're not allowed to put the pot on the heater. They have to put the pot on the heater. So if someone came into your house and put the hot on the pot on the heater before they turn on the heater, that would be something else. But for you to put on the pot on the heater before that would be a problem.
but let me ask you this. Okay, so when the temperature in the daytime, because that's when you have lunch, is at a certain temperature, they turn it on and leave it on all day. So it would be on before you ever got a chance to put the food on it. So what you're saying is on Friday, just
No, on Friday is not a problem. We're not going to Friday. Friday is another.
no, but I'm just listening. So what I'm saying is for Saturday, say for whatever you want. So on Friday night before you go to bed, you should put the well, it would be on then too. So you'd have to do it before Shabbos because they're always on. If you know it's going to be 30 degrees night and day, they're going to have the heat on. So you'd have to put it on before Shabbos.
Say that again.
Okay, so I live in a building. So when it gets down to a certain temperature in the night and a certain temperature in the day, it's on all day. There's no way you're going to get the food on before they turn it on, unless you put it on Friday before Shabbos.
I'm not following the situation.
The situation is that when you were telling me about it, I realized that my heater is usually like if I want to heat up food in a single family house, okay, and you had this type of heater, which you do in New York for some people. So what happened was is that your Gentile would put the food on and then he would turn on the steam. But in my building, as soon as it gets to that temperature, it's automatic. So it would just turn on. So I wouldn't be able to put food on it. So it's a moot point in a building. Like
no, yeah. But if he came and put it on, it'd be differently.
there's no way. No, they put, but you said you had to put the food on before the heater turns on.
Yeah, but the heater doesn't. The turning on a timer is not turning on the heater.
No. Oh, so then I could put the food on while it's
Not you. They could come put the food on before the timer goes on.
right. But I'm saying that you're not going to be up. You're going to be sleeping.
Okay,
So, but
you're getting technical. I'm saying halachically. I'm talking about the halacha of it.
fine. I got you now. I'm just saying, I was just making my point.
Now, I hear what you're saying. Let's go further. Okay, so that's the laws of now. Aaron's question about air conditioning, I have to check. We do know that definitely the idea with the let's say the janitor or the person, the maintenance person of the house, is that's his or her job. That's obviously then they're doing it for the job. In a situation where you call someone in to turn on the air conditioning, it would have to fall under the laws of, according to the Mishnah Berurah, it would have to fall under the laws of a chola, meaning to say that the person is feeling. The heat could be dangerous, and that could be the case in certain hot places. Okay. Hashofech mashkin mimakoim shekarka mitzameches. Now we go into another law about pouring wine onto grass. This is a big deal. Like it comes into play in a lot of questions. Can filling up water on that for sure is going to spill on the grass, etc. I'm not going to get into wading pools for children because that's another question. Kids are allowed to swim on Shabbos, but there's situations like that. So you're pouring water that's going to cause that whatever you're pouring on the earth is going to cause something to grow. So chayiv mishum zayreya, then you're not allowed to do that. Planting. That's sowing. Shareya mashke goyim shetisbach hakarka, because you're going to cause you're planting the earth. Lakain, because that's the case and that's the law. Yesh lihizar melechel begina. The question is, can you go to a park? We'll get into the question of a park in a question, but in general, can you go to your backyard and sit on your grass and have food, and knowing that if you spill any of your liquids, the liquids are going to spill onto the grass, and that's could cause growing. So it's very difficult if you're eating on the grass to be so careful that no liquids should fall into the grass. Then another question is about carrying in the garden, which is another question. So let's see the footnotes on this, because then this I brought up I created a bit of a spreadsheet, because the question, we have two questions here. One is the question of the laws of public parks in cities or areas that have an Erev, and this specific question of planting. So number 110, he says, the Magen Avram rules that it is best to be careful with all liquids, but the Eliyahu Rabbah maintains you need not be careful with wine because its alcohol content does not enhance growth. So the Eliyahu Rabbah says that if what you're drinking is something that has large amounts of alcohol, or let's say wine, so that is not a kind of liquid that causes growth. It's only water. So, but according to the Magen Avram, the Magen Avram says, which is another halachic authority, that says that all liquids should be avoided. So basically, which means, so if you go to your yard and you're able to, obviously spread something on the yard that's going to prevent any liquids from going to the garden and causing the water, any spill to cause planting or growth, so then it would be a way permissible. But if you're in a situation where you're just sitting on the grass, so I mean, according to, if you just look at the halacha, basically, to sit on in your backyard with a cup of water on your grass and read a book or a tea, it's not so simple, because you may spill the tea or the hot water on the water on the grass, and then it cause it to grow. And he says, besides this idea of carrying the liquids in the garden, he says this refers to the garden of 70 amas. That we know that even if you have a large yard, it's not so simple on Shabbos. A yard larger than 70 amas means a big field. That's considered an open field that's halachically problematic on Shabbos, even if it's a Rishus Yachid.
What's the different distance of an almond?
So that's why I made this chart that hopefully will come up this time.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Let's see. Again, I'm not taking any responsibility for these charts. This is just for the benefit of this class to help us understand the laws. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch 8028, which is what we just learned, says eating or drinking on grass on Shabbos is forbidden. Reason: if water spills, it irrigates the grass, which is a form of watering, zoireya, a melacha d'oraisa, which is a biblical law. Even though it's not your intent, right? You're not looking to plant the grass. You just want to drink water. But it's so inevitable, so it's considered what's halachically classified as psik reisha. Psik reisha means the actual definition of psik reisha is that I'm not sure when, but at some point, maybe Talmud times, the children used to play with the heads of birds after they were killed. So
I have a question.
hold on, Mary. So if you want to the halacha is, let's say you want to give your son or your child something to play with, so you could take off the head of the bird, even though the bird is going to die, but you're not looking to kill the bird. You're just looking to create a toy. But I'm not going to get into the complication of that of why they would do that. But I'm just saying the idea of it. So it's called psik reisha v'layomis. It's impossible to take off the head of the bird. You won't kill it. So there's certain things that are considered inevitable. So if something is going to happen for sure, that you're going to spill water, then even though that's not your intent, it's forbidden on Shabbos, and therefore it's prohibited. Hold on, Mariang. Bottom line is, Kitzur, do not eat, drink on grass on Shabbos due to the concern that the water or liquid may spill and cause watering of the grass. Yes. What's your question?
Okay, so when I read the Bible, like you guys call the Torah, I don't see any of these laws. So where are you guys getting the laws from?
Okay, so in general, in this class, this is not an open class for all conversation, but specifically for your question, this is the tradition of Torah. We have what's called the written law and the oral law. The written law is what's considered the Bible, what you would call the Bible, which is the 5 books of Moses, and in those we have most of the laws, but they're said in shorthand. For instance, on Shabbos it says, do not do any work on Shabbos. And the rabbis, which is what's called the oral law, and that was given to Moses on Sinai, is the tradition of what the details of these are. And that's that we have all the Talmud, the Mishnah, and the Halacha, and the Shulchan Aruch, which says what does it mean not to do work on Shabbos, and that's defined in the 39 halachas. And in these 49 things, one of them is planting on Shabbos. So you're not allowed to plant on Shabbos. From that comes also the idea of eating, drinking water on Shabbos that may cause planting. But this is all part of what's called the oral law. And for more information on that, you could Google check on the difference between the written law and the oral law. And we could talk about it a little more in the shmooze where we have more open time for open conversation. Okay.
Okay, thank
The
you.
Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch 336 that focuses primarily on the issue of walking or sitting. So the question is about, also there's a question of walking on grass. My father was always very careful when we were growing up to make sure that we shouldn't sometimes walk on the grass because if the grass is wet or tall, you must not walk or sit on Shabbos due to the concern of kotzer, uprooting. You may uproot the grass. So there also is a concern of running around in the park. Does not explicitly mention the issue of drinking, eating, drinking, hold on, Aaron, eating, drinking, or spilling water, but logically, spilling water that waters of the grass will be prohibited under the Zareya. So the Alter Rebbe would agree with what it says in Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe generally holds, like the poskim, that psik reisha is forbidden, even if it's unintentional. So if you're going to, even if you're going to drink water, even if your idea is to drink and not to plant, but if it's going to for sure spill over, that's a concern. So again, the Alter Rebbe says there's concern in general of being in a yard because if it's tall grass or other type of grass, it could cause uprooting of grass. He brings down from Rabbi Farkash over here that sitting on the grass could cause kotzer or dash. There's laws of either making digging holes in the ground when you walk or cutting the grass. Spilling water. He mentions again the idea of the same idea of the Shulchan Aruch. And he says over here, therefore, no eating or drinking directly on the grass areas in Shabbos unless the ground is completely dry, the grass is short dead, and no spillage is possible. Bottom line is that we have to be careful of drinking. Okay. Yes, Aaron, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, so me and my friends talk about lots of things. And one thing we were talking about was sidewalks because weeds grow. So you could step on a weed, you could pull it out. You could spill water, but he actually said water. If you spill water on a crack in the sidewalk, a weed could grow. So what's your take?
No, that's a concern. That's what we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful with spilling liquids on public on places that could cause growth. That's if it's could cause if it's not going to cause growth, it's okay. But if it's
But you
going
don't know. You know in a grass, yes, because there's dirt and there's grass and there's weeds and there's plants. But you don't always know what could grow in between the cracks in the sidewalk or
Yeah,
in the.
so a lot of the times the problem is it does grow in the sides of this in the sides of this sidewalk. Some sidewalks will have weeds grow from rain or water. So there those places definitely, like he says, the Bal Nefesh, someone who's careful should be careful. If it happens, it happens. But to sit there and to pour liquids on the cracks in the sidewalk is something you should not do.
Okay.
I just want to go into this, although this is not the halacha we're talking about, but I just wanted to tackle this issue, the idea of carrying in parks on Shabbos. It's not so simple about having a park, having an open space. So just going to go through this quickly. Carrying in a park on Shabbos, halachic bottom line. All right. General rule of carrying on Shabbos. Midaraisa, biblically, carrying in a Reshus HaYachid, a private domain, to a Reshus HaRabba, a public domain, means carrying over from a public place to a private place. Or to carry 4 amos, which is about 6 feet, in a public place, and Reshus HaRabba is forbidden. So that tackles the laws of carrying from one domain to the next domain and within a public domain itself. That's the biblical prohibition of carrying on Shabbos. Midrabanan rabbinic, carrying in a Carmelis, which is a quasi-public place, which is 99% of our areas. Someone like Barbara, where you live over there on the island, it's unlikely that there's a Reshus HaRabba over there. Reshus HaRabba requires to have, there's very few public domains halachically. A public domain would be Brooklyn, Manhattan, maybe parts of Seattle, but the public domain requires very large open space with a large amount of people, like 600,000 people to pass through it daily. That wouldn't be applicable to most places. And therefore, most public places, what we call public places, really are considered carmelis. A carmelis is a quasi-public place. And therefore, the carrying in a quasi-public place, although we don't do it and it's forbidden, but it's forbidden rabbinically, not biblically. It is also forbidden unless a valid Eruv is in place. So in order for you to carry in a quasi-public place, the quasi-public place has to be turned into a private domain, and that's what we know as the Eruv. So those who live in I think today Brooklyn has one, or maybe possibly Manhattan has one. There are public places that have Eruvs, and because of that, you are allowed to carry in the Carmelis. Yes, Barbara.
I was going to say, when I was going to a congregation in Sharit Tefillah, they would declare an Aruch. And
Yes.
is that the same thing?
Yes. So where Barbara is referring to is the north end of Seattle. The north end of Seattle, there's a map. Within that map, and there's a team of people that weekly check the Eruv, as long as they check it and they give the okay weekly to say that in these boundaries of space, which is where the Eruv is an enclosure. The idea of it is that you're enclosing the area to make it a private domain. It doesn't mean that we put up a wall around it, but there's what's called a lechi and korah. We put up poles, and today we piggyback on the telephone wires, and the poles and the wires. So we set up, and halachically you have to be knowledgeable about that, how to set it up to make sure that the entire area is enclosed. There are some places where there's ravines and it's difficult. And it's very difficult for the team. And there's certain places they have to cut out. They're not allowed to include in the Eruv. The laws of Eruv is not what we're discussing here, but if there's a kosher Eruv up, and it's been stamped by so to say, the community rabbi, or the halachic authority of that area. So then it's permissible if you're a person that carries in the Eruv to carry in this area that's marked off as a private domain. So the question comes is, what we're really focusing on over here is parks. So what is a park halachically? So most parks are obviously not Reshus Harabim, which means it's not biblical. There's no biblical prohibition to carry in a park because you don't have 600,000. So they would be considered a carmelis, which is a quasi-public area. However, if it's enclosed by a valid halachic eruv, so carrying is allowed, assuming the enclosure is halachically valid. Tzuras HaPesach means it was done properly. The area is not a Reshus Harabim Da'iraisa, which is not. It's not a public domain. But if it's not included in the city Eruv, means if you look in the city map and you don't see that your park is included, it's forbidden to carry. There's still a question because in Eruv, a park has another problem, which means an area that's not inhabited. Yes, Barbara.
So in Jerusalem, do they have Eruvs where you can walk and carry in the city like that?
Most of Eretz Yisrael, of Israel, has an Eruv. Not one Eruv, but there's Eruvs from city to city. You have to know, for instance, once you're outside the Eruv, so Jerusalem has a few Eruv. You'll have the Eruv that's under the what's called the Rabbanut, which is the state, a rabbinic authority, which is according to halacha. You'll have people that are more strict, which is the Eideh Chareidis, the more strict, and they have a smaller area that's covered by the Eruv. They're concerned with the larger Eruv being too open and unknown of any problems over the Shabbos, so they like to have a smaller contained area. But yes, definitely Yerushalayim has an Eruv, and we've had situations where the people were sabotaging the Eruv. Right before Shabbos, they would go to certain far out places near Hadassah Hospital and cut the Eruv. So then when we would find out right before Shabbos, and it was too late to fix the Eruv before Shabbos, a message would go out that the Eruv is down. And then you could fall back if you live in the area of the smaller Eruv within the larger Eruv, so that Eruv is usually being contained. So in Jerusalem, for instance, where I live is really on the border between where one side of the street is within the Eideh Chareidis, the more stringent Eruv, which is a smaller area. So if you were inside there, you could carry. But if you go outside that, you cross the street, then you already can't carry. Yes, Barbara. Only in those situations where the Eruv is down.
Okay, so and this is hypothetical, but in a couple of years, I'm hoping to come to Israel again, and specifically Jerusalem. Now, if I'm staying at a hotel and I go to the hotel and it's Shabbat, is there an eruv there, or would I not be able to carry?
Most of the hotels in Jerusalem are in the area, almost all of them. I mean, again, you have to just check, but if you're staying within West Jerusalem, then it is within the Erev, unless otherwise notified, the Erev is always up and kosher on Shabbos. There have been a situation years ago that they were going through an issue with the Erev before Shabbos, but that looks like whatever that was has been resolved. Okay, so here the question is, let's go to the question of the parks. Okay, so he says like this: a public domain. Hold on, a public domain is that is a public domain midaraisa, biblically considered a place of the public and therefore forbidden to carry. Means that 600,000 people pass through it daily, like the amount of the Jewish people were in the desert. And it has to be 16 amas, which is about 24 feet wide, about that, and open from both sides. That's the definition of a Rosh Hashanah. Most modern parks and cities do not qualify as a Rosh Hashanah deraisa, especially if the traffic doesn't reach 600,000. Even Central Park, I don't believe, has 600,000 people going through there. Therefore, a Tzuras HaPesach Erev is effective in most city parks. The question is, in Shulchan Aruch 83.1.2, the Alter Rebbe, Shabbat and 358 and Shabbos Kehilchatah volume 4 is the next problem with the park is a non-residential area like a park, even if fully enclosed, must not exceed 70 amas. So this is what Aaron asked before. It has to be square 70 amas and 70 amas, which means 5,000 amas square amas, which makes it a base I forget the Hebrew word, base satiyum. If it exceeds this side, it's not enclosed for dwelling purposes. Then it's not considered a reshus hayachid, and carrying is forbidden even if fully enclosed. So this is where the problem comes, where a lot of people have an issue with parks. If the park is larger than 5,000 square amas, which let's say 7,500 square feet. I think that's the right math. So no, sorry. Amma is 3 feet, so it'd be much more than that. It'd be about 15,000 square feet. If it's larger than that, if I'm correct in my assumption of the feet, oh, we have it down here. So then it would be it's too large. It's considered and it's not a dwelling place. So an eruv is not effective in a park, and that's why a lot of people are concerned of having an eruv in a city, because people end up carrying in the park. Like the question is, can you carry in Central Park on Shabbos? And I'm sure those questions have been asked, and it could be there's obviously.
I don't think there's an Aruch in the park.
Huh?
I don't think there's an Aruch.
Ben said, the whole Manhattan has an eruv, right?
That's not true. There's an Eruv around most of Manhattan, and it goes from like all the way on the east side to all the way on the west side. So Central Park is included in the Eruv.
Okay, thank you. But in my neighborhood of Brooklyn, Ocean Parkway, so there's an Eruv, and the people who follow it will say one of their sayings is that the train has their going through for the amount of people that we need
to disqualify it.
Right? No, the people who what I meant was the people who don't use it say that's one reason why, because the train comes through and there's too many people.
So this was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said they ended up putting an eruv in Brooklyn. He felt Brooklyn was a hard place to put an eruv. The Ocean Parkway was a very difficult street. So again, but here that question, obviously they've tackled it on a case-by-case basis. London, there was a lot of controversy when they put an eruv in London. Different large cities, the eruv causes, obviously makes it much easier for people to live, and especially families on Shabbos. And there are those who are strict because of all the questions. And even Rav Moshe Feinstein was very concerned when it came to the eruv in these big places. Seattle, the whole Seattle doesn't qualify. But the question over here that we're discussing is the parks: Central Park, Prospect Park in Seattle. Let's say Discovery Park, if there was an eruv over there. Once you have a open garden yard that has within it what it says over here, let's say 11,000 square feet or 17,000 square feet. It depends how big the amma is according to Chaim Noah or Chazon Ish. right? One amma could be either 1.5 feet to 1.89 feet, an amma to the foot to the amma. So we're talking about, let's say, 11,000 square feet or 17,000 square feet. Once this garden reaches that large, so then you have, and it's not inhabited, so the Eruv is not effective. You can't carry in such a large place. So that's where the parks become a problem in general. I don't know how large, let's say, Gan Sacher is in Yerushalayim, but if it's that large, it becomes
Well, we have a lot of small parks, and I don't know, they may
small is
still
not,
be big enough
I,
that
I
we
don't,
use it.
11,000 square or 17,000 square feet is not so big to make it
But I
to.
mean, when you say Central Park, you look at the line of sight, you can't see the end. But in these parks, I can see the other side. I can just walk in and see the other side.
Yeah, but still, at the end of the day, so it depends if it meets the criteria of 11 or 17,000 square feet.
That's what I'm saying. It could, but I don't think some people don't think that it's under the roof because I see people bring strollers, but that doesn't mean they're doing the right thing. But I believe the Aruv in Brooklyn, so I carry, but only the things I need for Shabbos. But I know most of the Sephardics don't agree with it, and they won't use it.
All right, let's just do the summary and we'll go back to halacha. Parks enclosed in city Erev that are less than that the Erev is in the city and they're less than 70 amas you may carry. Parks not included in the Erev, obviously you cannot carry. If the park itself is larger than 70 by 70 amas, which is about 11,000 or 17,000 square feet, depending on what you follow, then it's forbidden to carry. Carrying in muksa, obviously something that's a forbidden thing to carry, Erev doesn't help. And a park connected to a house or used as an extension of a dwelling may carry even if large. That's probably where people use, whether it is the restaurants that are in the parks or something that allow that kind of expand the space of the Erev, if there's some sort of what you could call dwelling connected. So if it's a yard that's connected to a dwelling place, it kind of allows for the expansion of the place. Let's just, Marianne, I'll get to you in a second. Practical bottom line. You may carry in a park on Shabbos. The park is within the Erev. It's reliable and well maintained. Erev, the park is not a Rishus Harabim Daraisa. That means it's not 600,000 square feet and smaller than the space of 70 square amas. Okay. Yes, Mary.
What are you talking about, like carrying? Are you talking about like a gun or what?
No. We're learning the laws of Shabbos, which is again the laws of Shabbos are talking about the prohibitions. You'll learn about this if you're going to continue in your conversion classes. You'll learn about when it comes to Sabbath, what are things we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And one of the things is carrying things in a public domain, carrying anything in your pocket.
Okay.
Shabbos. Okay.
Okay.
Let's go to law number 29. Sfoig she'ein boy loy beis achiza ein mekanchin boy. Another law. Can you use a sponge that does not have a handle on Shabbos? By not having a handle means by holding the sponge, you're going to be squeezing the sponge. And when you squeeze the sponge, you're squeezing its chita. That's another prohibition on Shabbos. One is not allowed to squeeze out on Shabbos. Is not allowed to squeeze it on Shabbos. So if it doesn't have a handle, if it has a handle, at least you could prevent the squeezing. You're holding onto something. But for using your hand on the actual sponge, it's going to cause schita.
But if you push down on the sponge on your plate because you're wiping off, then it would squeeze by accident.
Even if you have the handle, you're saying?
Yeah, the
Yes.
handle doesn't help. The handle would even make it easier to squeeze.
In some cases, yes, but it's impossible not to squeeze. Almost impossible not to squeeze without a handle.
That's
At
why I
least-
use a brush that can't.
That's what we have.
water.
Last week. We spoke about the Shabbos brushes that don't hold water. The
Yeah,
plastic.
that's what I use.
So it's for this reason. It's also muktzah and not to be moved. So here the Pri Megadim adds that once you're not allowed to use it on Shabbos because it involves a prohibition, which is squeezing. So therefore, you have no intention to use it on Shabbos because it's not permissible to use it on Shabbos, and it falls under the laws of something that's muktzah. So therefore, you not only shouldn't you use it to wipe things on Shabbos, but you shouldn't touch it on Shabbos because now it's not something that's used on Shabbos. According to the Talmud, Maseches Shabbos 143, squeezing of a wet sponge is inevitable when you hold it, and therefore it falls under the idea of schita. A footnote number Footnote number 114 says, if a sponge has a handle, squeezing is no longer inevitable according to Rashi and Rambam. So therefore, it depends obviously what we're using, but obviously what Aaron says, best to use those sponges that have Shabbos permissible sponges that are not going to squeeze out water. Let's do one more law, and then we'll open up to final questions for the class. Also, now we're going back kind of what we said before in law number 28 about spitting on Shabbos. Okay, we're not going to go into the hygiene or
Or your Chabad spitting.
we're not going to that. We did that conversation.
No,
right?
but just answer this: if you can't spit on Shabbos, then they can't do that on Shabbos.
If it's a place that is dirt, yes, you're right. Here he says the reason is because of the planting. It's forbidden to spit. He says number 115 is like this. It is a tolda of zayreya. This falls under again of planting, which means winnowing. It says in the Yishami, the poskim do not cite this. Yishami and the Birkat Yosef cite poskim who do not agree with this Ramah. This is a law that's brought down by the Ramah. But, Rabbi Kiva Eger, another commentary says on halacha, responds to number 20 rules that Zereh does not apply to water or spit, etc. Also when the rules that Zereh does not apply to water or spit, etc. Also when spitting, a person has no intent to scatter it to the wind, even if it is inevitable, many posts can permit doing something when there is no intention. Mishnah Brura tends to agree with Rabbi Kiva Eger. Okay, this kind of goes back on the question we had before about psik resha, to do something that's inevitable. The saliva will be scattered. It's a question. I don't know why he mentions over here that there's an opinion of the Rabbi Kiva of the rules that Zoreya does not apply to water. What does it apply to if it's not water? Either way, it's better not to spit on Shabbos, because spitting on Shabbos could cause, especially on dirt, if it's blowing in a wind that's going to spread the saliva to the grass. But that's not everyone is so
Akbar.
so machmer on this as according to the Ramah.
But let me ask you. Okay, so my son. Sorry to interrupt. My
No, no.
son has a lot of extra mucus. He's been to the doctor for it and everything. He has a thing. I think it's disgusting. So that's just my opinion. I tell him not to do it, even when it's not Shabbos. But he does it anyways, and he does it on Shabbos. And he says, "What am I going to do with it? It's in my mouth and it's disgusting." And he can't wait until he gets to the bathroom and the shul to get rid of it. He doesn't use a tissue because he doesn't, well, for whatever reason. So, is he doing a Avera on Shabbos? He spits
Okay.
on the cement.
Well, so first of all, there's opinions that say that that's not a problem. We just read that the saliva that can grow. Maybe it's talking about saliva versus water, and there's opinions that say that's not it's not your intention and it's not inevitable. But again, if he can prevent himself from doing it, he should prevent himself. If he can't, he has who to rely on that says it's not a concern.
Damn. I wish I could. Sorry for that word, but I wish I could find some way to get him to stop.
Okay, I understand that. Anyone, any other questions before we complete the class tonight?
Are we going to? Is there a particular part of this that talks about the Aruch laws?
Eruvin is its own section. It's a difficult. It's again, like Rebecca says about Manhattan. It's a difficult. There's two main issues. Is what can be included in the Eruv? What kind of domain, and who's in charge of the Eruv? If it's based on how it's not so simple to create an Eruv, and who maintains the Eruv, even if it's put up properly, if it's maintained properly. And then there's the questions of the parks. The parks is a question because the parks could cause things to could disrupt the Erev and carrying in the park. But again, there's the rule of the open area is in those days when they would enclose the valleys. Let's talk about in valley space where you want to make an Erev. So what's considered a livable space within a large open yard that makes it no longer, so to say, a field, but a place that people live in. So a park, again, will fall under that question of the valley, where, for instance, you're just out in the middle of the woods somewhere, and you're just alone. We're talking about you have no home, no house. You're just alone there, and you want to put an Eruv up. You can't make it so large that the Eruv is above 70 amos. Then it's no longer a private domain, and it's like you're enclosing in a park, and then you can't carry. So, but the laws of Eruvin goes into these questions of what's considered living space that breaks it no longer to be like just an open field.
Now, we discussed this for 2 days in my Tuesday class about pertaining to Brooklyn, but the head rabbi of the shul, now I'm not getting into swimming, I'm not getting into mixed swimming, I'm not getting into any of that. All the rabbi brought up one point is that since my pool is in the Aruch, in the area of the Aruch, and it's outdoors, and it's public for the people who live in the building, no one can, and you keep the Aruch, and you carry the shul, what you need for Shabbos, there's no reason you can't carry around the pool.
Yeah, but there's one more thing that you have to tackle, which is called Erev Chatzeres. There's halachically, it's not so simple. Even if you're, for instance, a shared space has to have a special what's called an Erev Chatzeres, where you unite the different people living in an open in a joint space. So it's actually not so simple when it comes to hotels or apartment buildings that people want to use public places on Shabbos, and you say it's a private domain. There's an Erev in the city, it's fine, but that doesn't cover the issue of Erev Chatzeres. So I'm sure the rabbi of your community or someone has worked on the issue of how to deal with the Erev Chatzeres in your building.
What I want to bring up is that even the people who don't swim on Shabbos, they'll come down to the pool, they'll carry some book, and a lot of the times it's a Jewish book, and they'll be reading something good to read on Shabbos, but they carried the book.
I'm just saying you have to know that public joint buildings have to have a special what's called an Erev Chatzeres. It's not done through walls or strings. It's done through everyone chipping into a meal, and then you make it into
my friend said when he puts up the sukkah so he can carry the food out, he brings loaves of challah to the owner of the apartment to share.
Yes, that's the Erev Chatzeres. Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining. We'll continue, and maybe we'll pick up a little the pace next week to try to get further tackle more laws on a weekly basis. We're going a little slow, but if anyone feels that the pace is good, just let me know. And
no rushing if we don't have to, but rush if you want. But I'm saying if we understand it at the end of your class, be good, because it's another thing we can follow more Machmir.
Yes.
No, Barbara,
thank you so much, Rabbi.
Does the pace work for you?
Yes, I think the pace works. Some of the laws, especially this Aruch law, and I know we were just sorry about the dogs, and I know we're covering the parks, but I think it's important. So, like when I go to some place, like I go to Jerusalem, this is going to be important, so I know it. So yeah. My puppies hear me talking. So
thank you,
Rabbi.
everyone.
Good Shabbos, everyone. Take care.
Good Shabbos.